What's next for the Democratic Party? This is a question that's been floating around since the election. Everybody's been asking themselves it as we prepare to move forward for the next cycle, realizing what went wrong this time and what we can change for the next time, where the two camps are lean more left or lean more right, which is, pretty obvious battle here. And I have and will further discuss my opinion on the matter, but I want to play these clips first to get into them and be back after with the context and conversation.
Well, there are five guys running.
Five white guys, right? Just make sure I got that right.
A lot of them have basically the same premise. 50-state strategy you keep hearing about. Fundamentally, a lot of this is tactical.
So there's a lot here in terms of tactics, which is where I think Democrats need the biggest overhaul. So I'm excited to get into it, right? If you watch like the Pod Save America interview with the Kamala staffers, you realize pretty quickly that these people didn't really have a backup plan after Biden dropping out, which is insane for like top of the line professionals who like behind the scenes knew about this for weeks before it happened. And they never really hit the ground running with what kind of messaging they wanted to use in the 100 days they had with Kamala. And it's kind of weird because they're still just like, oopsies, not our faults, which is like, these people can't be in charge. Like, these are not the people who can be in charge going forward. And during this 100-day campaign, what they developed was, and we all saw it, right? It's weird because Kamala started out leaning more into like progressive populism, against the elites. But what they developed over the time was this, let's appeal to Liz Cheney type Republicans, the middle, blitz on the ground with this rather than media and social media. And we'll have like these Republican figures on the ground with us. And all of this proved to be a massive mistake, right? It shows that our staffers suck, our super PACs suck. We saw them, again, guide her away from this progressive messaging that was really hitting hard. We saw her rocketing up in the polls. We saw her, this is where she was getting massive fundraising. All of this support was coming in while she was focusing on like this battle against the elites, battling price gouging, getting better wages, the opportunity economy. And they guided her away from that and more towards this litigation of Trump, which is why corporate donors also suck. And I agree with that. I agree with, yes, we should litigate Trump, but I think as like the heart of the party, economic populism is always what it will be, right? And it's always what it should be in the future, mixed with this new media way of reaching voters, right? Instead of like preaching to them at rallies, doing these podcasts, YouTube channels, X, Facebook, etc. So you're talking with them, so you seem more relatable. And as far as committee chairs, I don't really like any of the five that they showed on the screen there. Honestly, Ben Wickler especially is the chair who kept Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson off the ballot during the primaries, not wanting any challenge to Biden. So again, he also like represents this old guard, represents exactly what went wrong this cycle. And none of them represents the change in messaging. They're like lifelong Democrats, most of them, that we want. So like, no, thank you.
We need our own GOPAC. We need our own Federalist Society. We have variations of it, but we don't actually have them to be as successful as Republicans. We need to go into states and get the legislatures back. We need to fight for state Supreme Court seats where all these decisions are being made and not just focus on the shiny object. Bill Clinton had this line, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line, or something along those lines. We need to stop falling in love with the next Barack Obama or the next whoever, and need to start doing the hard work of rebuilding this party from the bottom up. And I mean that. And Chuck, I know you agree with me on this. We need to go into not just 50-state strategy to elect members of Congress and Senate. We need to elect legislators. 2/3 of the state Supreme Courts used to be controlled by Democrats decades ago. Now it's less than half.
These are also fundamental points to building back any party, building up any kind of party that, of course, aren't sexy to talk about. So you're not going to hear a lot. And, the more local you get, the less people are going to care on a national level. But it is where Republicans thrive in creating this mismatch in state legislatures and stacking the state courts. This way, you always see these decisions fall back Republicans' ways where laws and rights can continuously be tried and overturned. And as it's deferred back to these courts where they disproportionately have control. And this also helps them in the national argument where they can say, well, look, like our position on abortion has credence because as you can see in 3 states, it's been turned over and all of this. And they can, of course, just leave out the negative effects seen in the states once they turn these things over. But again, it just aids their arguments and gives more legitimacy to it when they can say, well, the courts agree with us. And we just don't have the infrastructure at the moment to really contend with that, which is something we need. We also need large lobbying groups like Heritage Foundation or the Federalist Society on our side, as we have nothing of the sort on the left. And I've actually had like conversations about things like this with people. And it's like, this has also expanded the disproportionate way we see this, with like Elon now being added on the right, with not only his endless bankrolls paying people $1 million a day to sign up to a super PAC, but also with his super PAC where he's threatening to like primary Republicans who aren't MAGA enough and all of this. And we just don't have that kind of money on our side, that kind of dark money influence, especially on our side, like Elon has with all his connections. And it's just one of those things where despite this exact thing being something as the left we want to get rid of, as Democrats we need to indulge in it, as we would just never win without it. It's just like where we are in terms of like allowing Citizens United to be overturned, or, you know, overturn Citizens United, and then we can have this conversation. So like we have to learn to play this game to the same degree, in hopes that in the long run, it elevates a much more beneficial message and outlook for America.
No tax on tips, no tax on overtime.
It drives me crazy because there's only so many rich white guys that Republicans knew could vote for them, so they got to go figure out how to get workers, and it's smart.
As
a strategist, it's smart.
But you know how they did it? Because we don't know how to, I've been banging this drum, we don't know how to communicate. The Democratic Party has no idea how to communicate to normal people
But
anymore.
if every consultant's got a master's degree, has it all figured out.
Well, I'm a consultant, I have a master's degree, and I do have it figured out, but I also know how to speak to people like they're normal, and not like I'm sitting there focus grouping, talking to you in one way because you're a Latino guy from Texas,
Chuck,
and talking to you in a different way.
I mean, she raised
If it was up to the
1.3.
general public, it would be there.
She raised 1.3 billion in 100 days.
Let me let you get in here.
The hard truth is that Democrats need to marginalize the people on their fringe, the people that don't know how to talk, the people that are the reason why that they/them ad that Trump did so well. They have to make those people feel extreme and politically homeless.
I disagree with a lot of this here, and we'll get into all of that. But first, where I do agree, Democrats have forgotten how to communicate issues to regular people like regular people. And this is another huge problem, again, with like tactics and things. And I think a lot of it has to do with two things, right? One is heeding to their donors, and the donor message being just directly incompatible with the new way people digest media and politics, as on social media, in these podcasts, Facebook, etc. People don't want to feel like they're being talked down to, as she said in the clip, like they're being focus grouped, right? Or like they're in a lecture, right? Where they're being taught or something. And I feel like that's how Democratic messaging comes across a lot of the time, like thumbing your nose to, oh, well, here's the data. Oh, you think prices are bad? Well, here's the data that shows wages outpace inflation. And even I'm guilty of that and things like that, right? These kinds of like, well, here's the facts of the matter. Well, facts don't really change people's feelings, which is like what people tend to vote on, which sucks, but it's the reality. And these are things you have to realize and then audible to be able to deal with. And another part of this is like, I think it's the standard that Democrats could be or are always held to. This is the second side of this, where if a Democrat introduces a policy, they already know instantly it's going to be attacked as this is going to destroy the economy in America as it is and all of this. So then they have to go into describing how it'll help, how to look, where it'll be implemented, how it'll be funded, what exactly it'll cost, how they're going to get the money to fund it and all of this. And they'll get crucified if they can't do exactly this, or if anything they say doesn't make sense. Like an example of this, right, in real time, to put in comparison of how this happens for Democrats and doesn't happen for Republicans, is Cori Bush. Cori Bush, I think it was the last time she ran, not this cycle, but the one before that, ran on taxing the rich. That was one of the biggest things she talked about. And a reporter one time specifically asked her, like, what is the specific exact percent and what is the exact tax that you would levy on the rich to make it be their fair share? And she was crucified for weeks in right-wing media because she couldn't give the exact number. She's like saying like what needs to be funded and things, giving a pretty coherent answer like, hey, they need to pay enough to where we can fund the things that other people rely on that they don't have to, you know what I mean? But they're like, she couldn't give an exact number. She couldn't give the exact tax. And so she doesn't know what she's talking about. And she was destroyed, drugged for weeks. And this is the norm for any Democrat. Meanwhile, Trump can literally say he has concepts of a plan that he's been talking about for 8 years, by the way, and never explain how he'll do anything, never explain how he'll fund his tax cuts or how he'll fund mass deportation or any of this, and gets a free pass never having to explain any of that. So I think that's also part of it in terms of where the messaging differs. But when you're also running from talking about economic issues like Kamala did at the tail end of her campaign, because your donors don't like the populist messaging, it becomes an issue where on the right, Trump's donors at least know he's a fake populist. At the end of the day, we've seen what Trump will do. He's going to do the tax cuts for the rich. He's going to favor corporations. He's always going to do this. So when he runs as a populist, they know, hey, like he's lying. He lied last time. He's lying this time. But on the left, it's like, No, you can't even talk about it. So now you can't talk about the issues that people are most upset about, which I think is where Kamala did the best early on. Again, when she was focusing on, hey, we're going to go at the elites for price gouging. We're going to make them pay their fair share. We're going to tax their unrealized capital gains. This is when she was surging in the polls. This is what resonated with people, but it fizzled out when she started focusing on litigating Trump in the battle against democracy. And that is why Democrats need to focus on this economic left messaging, talking about the elites, going after the elites, about deserving living wages, about economic opportunity for all, whether it be housing, childcare, healthcare, etc., where Democrats are the only party who would actually address these things. So make the argument about that. They're the only party who will actually fight for higher wages. Republicans won't do that. They think minimum wage should be lower or not exist. They're the only party that will fight for robust childcare. Republicans think your family should give in. They think that it should be privatized. Or they're the only party that will fight for robust health care, right? For all. Republicans think it should be privatized, and if you don't have the money to afford it, then that's your fault, right? So that's what we need to make the fight about, because that's what resonates with the people, with workers, with people fighting paycheck to paycheck, who can't afford medical care, whose job isn't paying them enough, and they feel like they're underappreciated. This is what resonates with those people in a way that Republicans never could. But because we didn't take that and we left that door open, we allowed Republicans to resonate with them through like lying about the fear they should have for immigrants, or like that kids are being transed, or whatever it may be for the said specific person, right? So like, again, we need to make the Republican Party the party that is against things for the middle class again, because they were able to kind of like put that in the backdrop, and it wasn't a focal part of this campaign where like, hey, Republicans want to take your Social Security and your Medicare, and then they want to give tax cuts to the rich and defund like food stamps and WIC to do it, right? Like these are the kinds of things that Democrats need to focus on, instead of just allowing Republicans to play fake populist because they're focusing on like taking Republicans' spot as the party of law and order or something. I just think it was a weird play.